with that. Excellent. Thank you, Mary. Any questions for Mary? All right, Sam, is your audio working? Do you want to do a quick share out? Oh, yeah, Carly, that's fine. She just said she doesn't want to AI notes.
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, great. What's a share out? So you said,
What'd you say?
do I want to do a quick share out?
A share out. Yeah, like, what you're working on your
Oh,
project
yes.
as far
Okay.
as the
All right.
driver retention program.
Yeah. No problem. I was
Okay,
sorry. I was not hearing you right.
no
Yeah.
worries.
So, we haven't made much progress, honestly, at this point on driver retention, or as well as particularly driver retention. I mean, a lot of that is where I'm at right now is just learning what we have, this year or seeing what we have this year with being able to recruit drivers to hire drivers. The real next step for me is after this season, reaching out to some other transit agencies and seeing, what their retention has been like, what policies they've put into place. The big thing that's clear to, I think, all of us that are working in transit in particular is housing. And how do we house our drivers? Currently at Town of Snowmass Village, we've got 4 seasonal housing units, and it's not enough. We still have 3 open positions. Um, uh, that we just haven't been able to fill. And we've got 40 applicants that need housing. So being able to provide housing, to provide it for when people come back the next year, I can say the best driver retention program that we have at Snowmass Village, and where something that I could suggest for people that have seasonal drivers, is we offer health insurance to our seasonal drivers, and then we will cover their health insurance through the summer and the off seasons if they return. We will give them the full cost of that COBRA reimbursement upon returning. I think it's a pretty generous program. It's been really great in retaining those seasonal drivers. So that's what we have learning experience here, and we still have to move forward with seeing what's working for other places. As far as we were working on, the other thing I had was the shared app. Not any updates from the state on where they're at. What I do know just from uh, trying to find out what technology is out there over the past few years, there are quite a few companies trying to be that final, mobility as a service solution, and combined everything. I don't think that anybody's kind of nailed it yet. The transit app's probably the closest. They have a deep integration with WeCycle, where you can check out your bike share right through there. You can get really good information on where all the buses are for RAFTA, where they're scheduled to be, you can do a trip planner through it. So they're achieving a lot of the goals, but they're not that platform where you can pay for all of um, your tickets for RAFTA or for any other service at this point. And I think that's where we really want to go with a shared service, where everybody just needs that one app to get all the information they need. I would, at this point, my recommendation for transit agencies, and even things like, I mean, Lyft is on the transit app, is that everybody partner with the transit app to at least have their information on there. Because I think in the near future, especially until this battle is won by some company to be the mass solution, transit's going to be the spot to be. I can say in the Roaring Fork Valley, um, all of the microtransit services and the village shuttles fixed route services are currently on the downtowner platform. We are planning still in this spring to all go to one app. Currently, we all have our own app. The plan will be to go to one. It'll be, gosh, I'm blanking on the name that we ended up on. I think it's Ride, Roar, and Fork is what we chose. It'll be the Ride app. You'll download it and you can scroll down and choose which of the communities you're in. I think it's a good direction for us to go. It only solves that microtransit problem and maybe only in the Roaring Fork Valley, but single app instead of 5 apps. I'm really excited about for the users. And then thanks for supporting me for chair. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the transportation director for the town of Snowmass Village. I run our transit program, our parking program, long-term transportation planning. I just completed a graduate degree in transportation or sustainable transportation planning. So this is kind of my passion. So anyway, thanks. And hopefully I got 4 to 6 hours a month to spare. I'm sure I can find it.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. And I think your expertise will be really great in the chair role. And yeah, just lots of stuff going on. I think that we can work on together and check off the boxes on some of these projects. So awesome. We have a few minutes left. I want to give just a few minutes left in this block of like updating on projects. So if there are folks in the room, this is a small group, that have updates or want to pose a question to the group that haven't yet had a comment or wanted to talk. Yeah, let's take a couple minutes before we hear from Anne. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. So, Anne Rajewski is the executive director of CASTA, and she's gonna give a presentation on our 2025 state transportation funding and legislation, which I don't know about you guys, but stuff that I've been seeing coming out is kind of scary and dismal. So yeah, I think it'll be really great to hear about actually what is going on and what we can expect. So take it away, Anne.
Hey, thanks for having me today. It is a weird season at our state legislature. We, as a state, passed a ballot initiative that funded local law enforcement with a lot of money from our general fund. And what maybe not everybody realizes is that the general fund of the state of Colorado does not have a lot of discretionary money in it. Most of it is already allocated out to various programs and departments in our state. And so we are in a situation this year where even a very modest fiscal note on a bill is likely to kill the bill. So there was one of the one of the bills that was proposed had a modest $100,000 fiscal note with it, and that killed that section of the bill. And $100,000 is not that much in the grand scheme of things for the state of Colorado, but things are very serious and it's all about cutting this year, and there's really not a lot of room for anything new. So to set the stage, what it feels like a lot of legislators are doing then is doing a lot of policy work. And that can be challenging because that can have fiscal impacts on, for instance, transit agencies, not on the state of Colorado. And so part of my goal, I think this legislative session is keeping an eagle eye on those things that are going to cost transit agencies in particular money that we don't really have to spare either. So let me just run through the bills that are active or recently killed, just so that you know what's happening with the transit sort of focus. So there's House Bill 25, 1007, which is around paratransit. This bill is the one there was attached to this bill was a stakeholder group that CDOT thought would take about $100,000 to manage And so rather than figuring out a way to do the stakeholder bill without a fiscal note, they just took the stakeholder group out. We would propose as CASTA that actually a state coordinating council could provide a lot of the same sort of service that that they were looking for from a stakeholder group, only with a broader perspective, because a state coordinating council is really similar to this regional sort of coordinating council, but you get people from CDOT and HICPUF and some of those other state level organizations to come in and understand where the barriers of those different departments are imposing on the folks trying to connect people to the services they need. So that's something that may come up next year in terms of a CASTA request to implement a statewide coordinating council, because we think it would be valuable in a lot of different arenas. But meanwhile, this paratransit bill continues to survive. There's a couple stipulations in there that are fairly awkward and frankly not super productive. One of the things they have right now in the bill is language about having fare boxes that are similar on fixed route systems and paratransit vehicles. The problem is that paratransit vehicles get different sorts of funding sources. It's hard for some of the folks riding paratransit to pay at a fare box. Most of them would just pass their stuff or have the driver manage that anyway. And on top of that, just in case you didn't know, this is something I learned a month ago, is that a fare box costs anywhere between $10,000 and $25,000 per box. And so we have Pueblo, Colorado, which does very good work, but they don't have fare boxes on their paratransit vehicles, and it would be more than $250,000 for them to come to comply with that unfunded mandate. Many of the bills get targeted towards RTD because there's some legislators who don't they have big concerns around RTD and how they operate, and it ends up being challenging for RTD in our legislature sometime. And this was kind of targeted to RTD, but of course, RTD actually is in compliance. And so it's kind of one of those things targeted at one agency, but it has pretty major fiscal impacts on another. So despite being kind of odd, because I think in general, transit agencies are really supportive of providing good service for folks through their paratransit services. This is a bill that we're really trying to reshape. On top of that, there's another stipulation in there about paratransit, about transit agencies coordinating with emergency planning in their communities, which is already happening, but also they're targeting at transit agencies when it should be a little bit more organic about what organizations really know where folks who use a wheelchair live. Because, for instance, in Boulder, Via Mobility actually has a much better understanding of where folks with certain disabilities live in the area rather than RTD, but this would stipulate that RTD would have to be the responder. So we're trying to make that allow for the more organic work that regions and communities have done. I go into this because it just seems kind of weird that we would be opposing something that feels like from the outside might look like it's really supportive, but I think it's going to cause confusion and some trouble. So this bill is still very much in flux. There's a stakeholder meeting that I'm going to be going to this next week, and then it doesn't pop up till the committee the next week. So something to stay tuned with. The next bill I wanted to mention is House Bill 1046, and that would have increased the number of TPRs, so transportation planning regions, rural regions in the state. And that bill has been postponed indefinitely. And so that means it's dead, essentially. But that kind of resolves around what's happening up in your neck of the woods, around the intermountain TPR and splitting that up and then combining some other TPRs to make room. So stay tuned. I'm sure there'll be some other work on that maybe next session. Um, and then Senate Bill 2530, it's called Increased Transportation Mode Choice. This is a bill that is requiring larger agencies to do specific planning around mode choice. A lot of agencies already do quite a bit of planning around this question, especially if you're part of a metropolitan planning organization or MPO region. You're doing a lot of that work already. So, we're partly it feels like there's a disconnect sometimes between advocates and what transit agencies are already doing. And maybe part of it is taking the information transit agencies collect in their planning efforts and answering the questions in a different way so that the legislators and the people who are very concerned about mode choice can understand what that looks like. But that's a bill. Right now, CASTA is, we don't have a position one way or the other, but we are watching it to see how that develops. And then there's just a couple other legislative issues that we're working on. RAFTA has a sales tax issue where they're being taxed. The Department of Revenue believes they need to be taxed for the employee housing that they're constructing. And so that's something that CASTA is working in conjunction with the RAFTA folks and in some ways on behalf of the other RTAs in our state too, because like Sam said, there's no resort agency serving a resort area that doesn't need housing. And so by charging sales tax on it, it's costing our agencies more money to build affordable housing. And affordable housing and transportation are two really important pieces of what the legislature leadership as well as the governor talks about and wants to affect and wants to see happen. And so it seems a little incongruous. So we're working on that. That may show up as an amendment to a bill once we figure out what the language needs to be to tweak that. And then another thing we're looking at is the Senate Bill 230 funding, which is the Senate bill that was passed last year that taxes oil and gas production in our state. And then that funding will go to transit services. Most of the funding goes to transit services. There's some for rail, and then there's a little bit for wildlife. But a good portion of that funding will go to transit. And it's really exciting. It's the biggest investment our state has ever made in transit before. In the past, the state funding for transit, if you do like a little pie chart of where the funding comes for transit in our state, you find that like 3 to 4% comes from the state, where a much larger portion comes from local agencies, which or local supportive agencies, which you guys are in a community in a region that really supports transit really, really well at the local level, at the regional level. And then, of course, there's federal funding in the mix too, but that shows up generally at about 25%, and then tiny bit of state funding. But now we're talking in 2026, the CTE, which is in charge of this Senate Bill 230 funding, will have access to probably $55 million that will go to transit. And then once the enterprise gets beyond the 5-year it's been in business for 5 years, then there's not a limit on how much money it can pull in. So for the next year or so, there's a limit on how much money the enterprise can pull in. And then after that, it's likely that funding will double or more. So we could be looking at 100 million or more dollars coming in for transit services, which it's really exciting, especially when we're looking at the federal situation right now, which is super uncertain. And many of the POTS, Colorado agencies and agencies serving resort areas in particular have been very successful in. It's nice to see the state funding increase in the face of that. So the expectation was Senate Bill 230 funding. The CTE has hired a new director. He's doing a lot of research. He may have talked to some of you. He's been doing a really good job reaching out to stakeholders and folk or leaders of agencies that might, be getting funding from that funding pot to see how that should all work. And then he'll lead the CTE board through a process of determining formulas and discretionary funding requirements and all those pieces, keeping in mind the legislation and what's really written in the bill. So we're watching that pretty closely. It sounds like their first call for projects will be in 2026. Right now, they're starting to collect the money, and so they won't do this disbursement until 26. But that gives them a whole year to figure out what all the pieces will look like. So hopefully when they do the call, it will go smoothly. So that's something that everybody, I think, will be watching pretty closely. It's quite a bit of money and pretty important to our state. As a transit advocate, I just want it to be used well, spread around the state so that it feels equitable. But there will be a focus on areas of the state that are that provide more service than others. And so we'll see how that all shakes out. I think, whenever you're doing a formula in our state, because of the complicated mix of Dolores County rural sort of service versus RAFTA rural service, those agencies are both rural under the FTA guidelines. It takes art and science to make any sort of formula that's statewide feel like it's fair and that it works and that areas and regions are getting what's appropriate in terms of their funding levels. So that's another thing we're tracking pretty closely. We have some nice transit agency representatives on that board. You guys are probably most closely represented by David Averill, who is the director of SMART, which is the regional system that serves Telluride and then the surrounding communities of Telluride. That's just kind of a quick overview. Do you have any questions or anything else you'd like to hear about more?
And I have a couple of questions on Senate Bill 24-230. I put some information in the chat for folks around what the clean energy transit enterprise, what their function is and who's on their board. And there's actually their first board meeting coming up later this month. I want to say that you can watch on YouTube. You can't actively join, but you can watch it, which will be pretty interesting. I would love to be connected with their executive director and also Dave Averill with Smart, just to have conversations on behalf of the RTCC and just make sure that, I know everyone's going to be on the radar, but, I think just making sure that we have that relationship started at least, because we have a lot of great things that we want to launch and there's no funding to be had to kind of get some of those things off the ground this year. So really wanting to just kind of start to plant those seeds so that folks are aware of, hey, this is what we're working on, and this is what we might need funding for next year. So I would love that.
Okay. Yeah, I can connect you after the meeting. Any other questions about that?
Yeah, hi. I'm from Carbondale, and you'll have to forgive me. This is my first time even listening to these kinds of proceedings, so there's a lot that I really don't get. But I'm very interested in what the bill that you talked about with paratransit, and uh, and you mentioned a program I don't know if it's existing or emerging in Boulder where uh, the paratransit is being connected with emergency services. Is that what I heard you say? Is there a collaboration to evacuate people in an emergency?
Yeah.
Could you tell me about that program?
Yeah, in the research I've done, there's not like a specific program, but in the research I've done, I think communities and regions in Colorado have been really good because of the recent kind of natural disasters we've had in our state of really connecting the right services, the people who provide services to the emergency plan so that they know, like in Boulder County, for instance, what I heard from them is that VIA Mobility is their first level responder. And if VIA can't do everything, then they call RTD and see if RTD can send some vehicles. And so they have these fairly complicated plans already in place about who is doing what in these situations. So that's, I mean, and I heard a few weeks ago that they've included even, in the eastern part of our state in La Junta and Las Animas and Lamar, that they're putting together an evacuation plan there as well that includes the transit agencies in those communities as well as the regional entity. So that's happening kind of organically already because people recognize the need for that to happen. There's not a program. I think when we're talking about this bill, I think what we'd rather do is say the emergency management planners need to make sure they've reached out to the transportation providers in their community rather than assigning it to the transit folks because they're not in charge of the planning effort. So,
Okay. So of all the places where this is either emerging or in place, can you refer me to the place that you think has their act most together? Some place that I could contact and find out what seems to be the, a copacetic way to proceed?
well,
Where is
I mean, are you looking at it from an emergency planning perspective, or would you like it from a transit agency perspective?
Yes.
Provider.
Both.
Well, what I think I might do is after the fact, if you drop your email in here, if you're on the invitation, I could look it up. But I can, I would say the thing about Boulder is that they've experienced the Marshall Fire. Boulder County has experienced the Marshall Fire. And so they've had some recent experience with it. And so that might be the best connection for you. Because you're so much more rural than them though. I mean, I wonder um I just wonder the if there's some I'm gonna just ponder if there's someone else
Yeah.
too to connect you to that's
Yeah.
more rural,
This
because I
seems
think
to
that might
be
be helpful.
this seems to be a window of opportunity because there's such a heightened awareness about what could happen in an emergency and how complicated evacuations can really be. And we're just starting to talk about that in Carbondale. How do we get people out that don't drive? Uh, and we're just beginning to think about how to even begin this. So it'd be great to be able to talk to somebody that has thought it out and started a
Yeah.
program.
Yeah, and I think it's complicated by the fact that because so many of our vehicles and agencies get federal funding, that means they have to comply with federal laws around using their vehicles, and there has to be certain protocol that are met. And some of it's up to the transit agency leadership, but other pieces sometimes are required before you can send your vehicle in to do that kind of work. So that also complicates the situation.
Yeah.
So something that that just needs to be worked through.
Hey, thank you very much.
Mhm. Any other questions on that stuff?
And Sue, Dawn just put some information that there is coordination already happening between Garfield and Pitkin County's emergency management planners and RAFTA. So maybe if the two of you want to connect better on that. And I think, Anne, we we all, a lot of us in this region live in some very fire prone areas that we've experienced pretty bad fires in the last, gosh, 10 years. I'm trying to remember the year that the Lake Christine fire was, which was in Basalt. And then we had the Grizzly Creek fire in Glenwood during the pandemic. And so I think, yeah, I think I'm not as involved in those efforts, but I think there's probably a lot of conversation already happening around that. Um, and Sue, we can plug you into that to find out more.
Dana, if there's no more questions about the legislative stuff, can I just make a quick plug for a few things that are happening at our conference?
Yeah,
That might
absolutely. Does anyone else have questions? Go for it.
Okay. I did have my email in there, and you're welcome to drop me an email anytime if you have questions. CASTA gets a grant for the Rural Transit Assistance Program, which means we provide a lot of technical assistance. We answer a lot of questions about rural transit in the state, and you're welcome to drop me a call because it's my job to answer that stuff. So feel free. The other thing I wanted to mention about my spring conference is I'm excited about some things, some trainings or sessions we're going to have that might relate to some of you. And one of those things is we're going to have a Mobility Managers 101 day. We're going to have someone come out from the National Rural Transit Assistance Program at the national level to do a day-long training about mobility management, what it means, what it does, and even if it's only a small portion of your job, I would think it would be valuable for you to come and be part of that training. And then along with that, we're going to have a regional coordinating council and a local coordinating council leadership forum, so that networking event, so that you folks who are participating in coordinating councils can get to know folks from other parts of the state, because I think that's how you can pass your people off. Like I can get you to here. Let's talk with this person who can get you the rest of the way to your appointment. And so, that kind of handoff could go more smoothly in that case. And then the other thing we're going to be doing is a RTA training session where we're going to get RTA representatives from different, like older RTAs and younger RTAs, and talk about best practices, things that have worked well in the communities, in their communities, in the way they've set up their RTAs, things that have not worked as well that they would be changing. And so we're going to have a big old discussion. There's a number of regions in our state that are looking towards an RTA setup. And so if that's something you're interested in, or any of your leaders would like to be part of that discussion to hear more about it, stay tuned. We'll get that information out soon. It's likely going to be Tuesday afternoon, May 6th. So that will be informational and good discussion.
Awesome. This sounds like a really exciting conference, and I'm looking forward to attending for sure. And I'll make sure to pass it along to folks in Summit and Route County who are actively pursuing their RTA. So I'm sure you've already been in touch with them, um, as well as Eagle County, who just finalized their RTA, is now Core Transit. So yeah, I think we have a lot of folks in our region that could add some great things to the conversation, in addition to Rafta, who's the expert on RTAs. Awesome. This has been super helpful, Anne. I feel like I've learned so much, and yeah, thank you for being available and open for anyone to communicate with you. I definitely ask Anne a lot of questions and pick her brain on things because she definitely wants to advocate for us and um, know what's going on in our region and know what things we're looking at to do to improve transportation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne. All right, let's move on to Dana. You want to present some field trip options?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to call on Erin to talk a little bit. We talked about this. Erin and I are part of our Wellness and Culture Committee at Northwest Colorado Council of Governments, and she had brought up an idea of doing a field trip to the Eisenhower tunnels in the summer. So, Erin, I don't know if you want to share a little on that.
Sure, it's just something I have always wanted to do. And then when Dana and I were talking about it, and we were like, oh, transportation, maybe the RTCC folks would be interested. You can do an in-person tour of the Eisenhower Johnson Tunnel. Um, each person has to fill out a form, which includes a lot of personal information. I'm sure they run your information through some kind of, oh, that's very neat. Through some kind of background check because there would be uh security issues with such a major artery for transportation. Um, but yeah, I think Dana and I just wanted to judge interest before we pursued it and sent out, you know, proposed dates or even the forms. And if nobody wants to do it, we'll just pursue it here at the COG.
I think that's a great idea to open it up to all of our committee members and even I saw the comment there, Carly, the Hanging Lake Tunnel tour, that is always a good one too. So I'm open to inviting everybody.
Well, maybe we'll continue pursuing it and they may say, listen, there's just one day that you can choose from, at which point we can be like, hey, this is the day. If you want to come, here's the information
Yeah.
and go from there.
I love that. And Anne also wants us to adopt her for that day because she's always wanted to do the Eisenhower tunnels. So,
Right?
yeah, I think, yeah, we continue this conversation. Um, and we can send out an email once we kind of have like, these are dates. If you want to come, this is when we're going. It probably won't be until, I don't know, July, summer. Yeah.
Okay. That sounds great. Let's
Cool.
have a meeting in the tunnel.
A meeting in the tunnel. Awesome.
Good.
Um,
Okay. I guess I'm gonna kind of move it along. This is a long meeting. So we could go into, Dana, if you want to talk about partner matching funds for 2026.
yes. Currently, right now, through the RTCC, we have 5 partners that contribute matching funds to help the RTCC operate, as well as I do manage our Intermountain Transportation Planning region too. So our funding that we get from CDOT directly funds my salary to provide coordination for both of those groups, and it requires a 20% match. So there's 5 partners within the RTCC that generously contribute every year to help make up that 20% match. Um, because we have, again, projects that we all want to work on and get done, and funding is kind of slim and non-existent for this year. I will be trying to recruit at least 3 more partners that are willing to contribute some matching funds. Um, Ideally, I'd like to have the RTCC not only continue its work and keep building on what we're doing, but also have a pot of its own funds that we can um, use to advocate for bigger projects, to kind of have some seed funding and some skin in the game for things that we feel really strongly about. So I'll be drafting what I'm calling a values memo, just kind of like outlining what the RTCC does, what are the benefits, what we have accomplished, what we're going to accomplish. And I hope to have that to you all by the spring so that you have enough time to chat it over with your leadership and decision makers. So hopefully we can get into your budget for 2026. Any questions on that?
Yeah, Dana, can you share who the current partners are?
Yes, we have Steamboat Transit, Winter Park Transit, RAFTA, Core Transit, and Summit Stage.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Cool. And man, we might get out of here early, which would be awesome. I know you guys would be really excited about that.
I think it is, yeah, long meeting for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Yeah. So
Yeah, since we just meet quarterly, we jam pack everything into a couple hours every few months. Um, do folks have any of their own updates? I know I asked this earlier, but if you thought of something and you want to share, um, or you have questions or want advice from the group, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Or wait till next meeting.
Yeah, or wait till next meeting.
I'll share that it is still on my agenda at RAFTA to look at whether or not we should be expanding our paratransit services and how that should happen. And so that's a really big, huge project. And I also have to manage 2 teams, and they've lost some team members. So I have been really silent on a lot of things RTCC, and that is because I'm just keeping my head above water. So bear with me, but we are not dropping the ball on some of the vision of for the Mid Valley here, particularly for your interests, Mandy and Carly. We're looking at it. I don't think you're going to see a dramatic you're not going to see any actual service changes in 2025, but for the long term, like, there's just a lot of footwork to get us where we need to go. A lot of research and a lot of there's just a lot of there's a lot. Well, I'll just leave it there. So I'm still here. I'm still plugging away, and that's my update.
Thanks, Don. I appreciate you. And if there is any way that we can help or, start to reinvigorate that conversation and I don't know, ask others of what their solutions are. This might be a good thing for the CASTA conference to like learn from others. Like, what does this look like? How have people done this successfully without, you know, a ton of resources or, getting creative with some things. So, yeah, let me know if how I can support that.
I will look for a place on my calendar.
Any other partner updates? Don't think I have any. Okay. Well, I think we're gonna end our meeting here as we adjourn. Is that okay with everybody? Or anything else? Mary, did you have something? Okay. All right. Let's adjourn the meeting then. Thank you everybody for being here. That was great information and look forward to seeing you. When are we meeting again, Dana?
Our next meeting is May 7th, which is actually over the CASTA conference, but um, it'll just be in the morning. So if folks are planning on going to the conference, we're still gonna have our meeting on that day just because it's kind of difficult to rearrange at this point. Um, but it would be great if we could kind of rally. If folks are going to the conference, we can all find a space to meet together and have it like half virtual, half in person. Um, so yeah, that's when our next meeting is, and stay tuned for an email from me with to-dos and follow-ups and all that fun stuff. I appreciate you all and have a great rest of your week.
You everybody.
Thanks, Dana.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Dana.
Bye.